Are you an adventurer looking to take your hunt to the next level? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to East Meets West Hunt with your host, Bo Martonic.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the East Meets West Hunt podcast presented by onX. So onX has a feature online that I don't think I've talked about yet, and it's something that's really helpful, and it's a free feature to anyone, not even if you have, membership to the Hunt app or if you have a chip. It's free to everyone online. It's called Hunt Central. So if you go over to onxmaps.com, click on a little hunt icon on the top, scroll down to Hunt Central, and you can go through each state and pull up the details on seasons, licenses, regulations, the percentage of public lands, private lands, and really dive into specifics. Say, let's go, for example, you want to elk hunt in Idaho like I am this year. You can click on a little elk icon. It pulls up how many Boone and Crockett elk have been taken out of Idaho, some of the seasons dates, what tags you would need for that, as well as breaks down the costs of the elk tags for resident, non-resident, some of the application fees, links to all the big game seasons and rules, and it really puts everything in one place. And once you overlay that with using the Hunt app online or on your phone, tablet, you're able to really have scouting all in one place and planning out these hunts. So by using onX Maps, if you want to check out the Hunt app and use the coupon code EMW, you can save yourself 20% off that. So head over to onxmaps.com, check out Hunt Central and the Hunt app. In addition, Corey Jacobsen and Elk 101 have put together the most all-encompassing elk hunting course, and that is the University of Elk Hunting. You'll hear Corey on today's episode, and this is the fourth time I've had Corey on, and there's a good reason for it. His knowledge with elk hunting and the people that he's surrounded by is unbelievable, and we're really lucky that he puts that out for everyone to be able to consume this content and learn and try to reduce that learning curve, which is what we're all trying to do by listening to podcasts and reading articles and taking in content however you choose to do so. So University of Elk Hunting, if you check that out online, you can save yourself 20%, which comes to $20 off of the University of Elk Hunting online course by using the code EastMeetsWest. The next partner of the podcast is Maven Optics. So Maven is redefining the optics business. So they were born out of wanting to solve a problem, basically out of the idea that they could develop a premium product without compromising on quality and performance. So that idea, how they could do that, to offer that to customers at an affordable price, was to sell those world-class optics directly to the customers themselves. Because stores kind of fill their shelves with products to fit a specific retail price point, that puts a limit on companies and the products they're able to produce, which really in turn means that quality and performance suffer. So you can't find Maven in retail stores. They work directly with the customers to put out the best quality optics at a lower price point. So if you want to check out Maven Optics online, go to mavenbuilt.com, use the code EastMeetsWest-gift, get yourself a free gift with any full price optics order online. And lastly, and not least, is Heather's Choice. As we're all getting ready here for hunting season, getting together your food and your nutrition is extremely important. I think it's important all the time, year round. But with hunting season, if you want to fuel your body with food and fuel that really, helps you out and helps you perform better for longer, then you should check out Heather's Choice. High fat, high protein options and meals, from dinners and breakfasts down to some snacks with their delicious packaroons. You can check them out, and if you use the code EastMeetsWest at checkout, get yourself free shipping on any orders over $99. And if you want to, just try some few things out and don't want to spend, $99, please use the link in our partners page on the website or in the show notes of this podcast. It really helps us out a ton. Okay, so with that being said, on this podcast, I have Corey Jacobsen coming on, and I'm really excited for this episode. Corey is just a blast to get to talk to. Is the fourth time coming on the podcast, as I'd mentioned, and he's got so much knowledge. We're going to really, dive into some stuff here to hopefully you can pick out some nuggets, some things that, we had not talked about in the past, and really gain some knowledge here from, one of the world's best elk hunters, in my opinion. So this episode is definitely going to be a special one. And if you've noticed, and I've mentioned it a little bit, I've been releasing 2 episodes per week. I've got a lot of elk hunting content, a lot of stuff that's going on. We need to get this information out as much as possible. And so I'm going to just be punching out some episodes here. The one from Corey here. I also have ones from Josh Boyd. I have just a whole bunch of Clint Casper, a bunch of people coming on here, soon. So definitely be checking this stuff out. Give me feedback. Let me know what's going on. And then lastly, the one thing I did want to mention, I guess there's 2 last things, but the first one is I just wrote an article for Onyx over on their website, on their blog. It's called Plan, Prepare, and Execute a Western Hunt. So I really broke down all the pieces and components that I've talked about a bunch of times, but put it in an easy-to-read format. So you can go check that out on Onyx's website and see, maybe you can, if you're not planning to hunt this year, you can really use that to plan going ahead. And if you are this year, there might be some information in there that can really help you out. So check that out. And lastly, I just wanted to say that have, some apparel up on the website. If you want to stock up here before hunting season, really help support the podcast. I'm trying to put out, some really cool lifestyle apparel items. I'll be wearing the Stealth multicam trucker hat on my hunt, and really looking forward to getting to rock that hat. I'm excited about it, and it's really good for hunting and everything else, and wearing out wherever. So 3% of those proceeds are donated to backcountry hunters and anglers and the QDMA. Currently, I plan on expanding that list as things go. Each item is specific to an organization, so check that out in the product pages there. And hopefully by the end of this week, I'll have another new product coming out, adding to the website, and it's custom Nalgene bottles. Something that I've been really pumped about. Made a custom color options and just really cool design. I think it's going to be pretty awesome. So be looking forward to them coming out. I'll get them up on the website here shortly. But all right, enough rambling on by me. Let's really get into the podcast here with Corey Jacobsen. All right, welcome back to another episode of the East Meets West Hunt podcast. It is the middle of August here, and I have on the line Corey Jacobsen. What's going on, Corey?
Just counting down the days till elk season. So as we were talking before we started the podcast, that this is my busy time of year for work. Everybody's ramping up for elk season, so they're sending in questions and emails, and we're trying to put out content and everything, and it's crunch time now. It's just about go time. Yeah,
it is. And when does your season start?
So Idaho's opening day is 2 weeks from tomorrow, and that's August 30th. It opens here. So we'll be hunting opening day the first 2 days here, and then regrouping for a few days and getting packed up and heading off to the next hunt. So those first 2 days are more just we're here, we're local. It's kind of a good scouting trip for later in the season, and we've actually gotten some pretty good hunting early, so we're going to definitely not pass that opportunity up.
Yeah, no, that doesn't sound too bad, and like you said, it's you only get, well, I guess like you said in the past on here, is you only get 1 month a year to have this to happen, so take advantage of the time that you have, right?
Totally. Yep.
Yeah, That's for sure. No, that's good. And for anyone that's listening, and we're kind of gonna skip a little bit of the intro with Corey here, is you've been a guest I think 4 times now. So there's if you're not familiar with him, so if Corey, if you want to give a quick 1 or 2 line kind of introduction to yourself here, that would be good, and then we can dive right into talking about your hunting plans.
Yeah, no, maybe instead of an introduction, I need to give an apology. If I've been on 4 times, people are probably tired of of listening to us. But no, I'm a very, I don't know, the word passionate seems weird to use, but I'm a very passionate elk hunter who has a deep love for elk and elk hunting, and especially sharing my experiences with others in hopes that they will be able to learn something from it and become more consistently successful themselves as an elk hunter. I love seeing other people be successful, and I love elk hunting. And so to be able to combine those 2 things, it's a humbling blessing to be able to do that for a real job.
Yeah.
If you consider it a real job.
Yeah, no, for sure. And what's cool is actually everyone's probably heard your name on every episodes with the University of Elk Hunting at the beginning of every episode there. So if they weren't sick of hearing your name then, they'll definitely be by the end of this one.
Perfect.
And I think, no, but in all honesty, the episode that we recorded back in March surrounding, planning a do-it-yourself elk hunt was by far the most downloaded episode that I've had to date. So it shows that there's a lot of people that have a need to want to learn about this and got, a ton of feedback on it. And that's been really good. So I think everyone's happy that you're coming back on again, Corey.
That's good.
Yeah.
No, and I when we did the linguist film a couple years ago with Sitka and Con Outdoors, I had an opportunity to visit with Larry D. Jones, and coincidentally, I had an opportunity to visit with him again a month ago, and we did a podcast with him. But he said something when we were filming the linguist. I had asked him a question. We were talking about him being a pioneer of elk calling, and I said, were people hungry for information? Did they have a desire to learn more? Back then in the mid 80s. And he looked at me and he said, let me tell you something. People are hungry for elk hunting information today. And I think just with the several different platforms and formats that there are to share information, there's no better time to learn. And for those of us who love sharing that information, there's no better time to be able to produce that content, because it is just so easy to share with others. So
yeah, I mean, there's so many different platforms out there, from podcasts, so audio and video and writing and all the other different avenues, and it's all right there at your fingertips. You're able to get on your cell phone or computer, tablet, whatever else, and I think it's definitely creating more opportunities for people to be able to go out and make these dreams come true.
Absolutely. Yep.
So Corey, you said you're starting off, in Idaho for a few days, and then you're taking off, and you're going to a whole bunch of states just seems like a pretty packed schedule. And can you explain a little bit about the project that you're doing here to kind of get us kicked off?
Yeah. So we started last year, which was 2018. We started a day-by-day video series on the Elk 101 YouTube channel called Destination Elk. And really what it was, we had our season planned out. We knew where we were going hunting. And rather than, capturing content like we typically do and then maybe making a film, longer 30-minute film about the hunt and showing everything that, condensed into 30 minutes, we decided to do a day-by-day series. And we actually, back in, I think, 2009, we called it a semi-live webisode on the Elk 101 YouTube channel. And we filmed our Idaho hunt, which I think ended up being a 10-day hunt. We filmed each day, and then we released each day as an individual video on YouTube. And, that was back when YouTube was still grandma's looking at cats rolling balls of yarn across the floor. It hadn't turned into what YouTube is today, where people are just absorbing everything through it. And so We'd got more into some of the film stuff for a few years, and then last year we decided to go back to the day by day, almost a semi-live deal where we could take people along and show them, what we do in the morning, getting up, getting our packs ready, what we're eating for breakfast, jumping in the truck, driving to the trailhead, getting out hiking, trying to get bugles, and really show the details. And it really allowed people to be there with us almost. People that was a lot of the comments we got was, man, I just felt like I was right there. I felt like I know you guys. I felt like I was your hunting partner. And so we did that last fall. And, there were a couple things that I think we learned from that. Number one, we hunted Oregon, and then we went to Wyoming. And then from Wyoming, we came back and hunted Idaho with an individual who won a hunt with us that we had given away through Mountain Ops. And then from there, stayed in Idaho, but a different place in Idaho, and went on the Hunt of a Lifetime hunt. And then from there, hunted Idaho with my children in October. And it was too much. There was pressure because those hunts, we only had 5 or 6 days on most of them to be successful. And we had 2 or 3 tags to fill. We didn't have time we were forced to hunt a time period, either early or late, when it wasn't ideal. And it took some of the fun out of it. And so this year we said, rather than missing all of my son's football games in September and my daughter's volleyball games in September, because we literally were gone, the whole month. We were home for 2 days and then gone for 6, and then home for a day and gone for 5. But we were gone the whole month from a emotional and mental standpoint. So this year we're gonna break it up a little bit and maybe stretch it out. So we're going to hunt those first 2 days in Idaho, and then we'll be home for, I think, 5 days. And then we're going to head to Oregon, and we're going to hunt a 9-day period in Oregon during a better time than what we did last year. So it'll be, I think, September 4th through the 14th, somewhere really close to that. From there, we're going to come home for a week and regroup and go to volleyball and football games and do some fun stuff there, and then we're going to hit it again hard here in Idaho, the last basically 9 days of the season here in Idaho. And then we will only have a couple days to transition into the Hunt of a Lifetime hunt, which anybody listening that's not familiar with that, we have an opportunity each year to take out a child who has a life-threatening illness. And in the past, it's been kind of our capstone hunt at the end of the season. This year, our season's going to go on past that, but every year it is the hunt that realigns us and reminds us of why we do what we do and just how blessed we are to be able to do that. And these are youth that are going through leukemia and cancer and just all sorts of big struggles. And so for them, their dream isn't to go to Disneyland. Their dream is to go elk hunting. And we get to be a part of, facilitating a camp that takes them out and helps them. Fortunately, so far, we've been 100% on success. And I think beyond that, though, we're able to show them what elk hunting's about and take them on an adventure that we take for granted sometimes. And for them, it's their lifelong dream. And so we're doing that hunt the first week of October. And then our rifle season in Idaho opens October 15th. So as sports schedules and school schedules allow, I'll be able to hunt with my children for the next 2 or 3 weeks there. And then we'll actually end our elk season in Montana, and we're going to go rifle hunting with Randy Newberg over in Montana. So I've only shot one elk in my entire life with a rifle. And so this will be it'll be something, I wouldn't say different or new or anything, but it's something I haven't spent a lot of time doing. So,
yeah, no, it'll be a fun experience, I'm sure. Just a little bit different than your daily stuff. I'm sure the tactics and everything will probably change a little bit.
Yeah, I told Randy, the stereotype of the road hunters just driving around with a cooler in the back of the truck and shooting elk from the road. I thought that's what I'm expecting. So I'm just planning on listening to some good music and sitting in the heated cab of the truck and shooting an elk from the road. And he laughed and said, we'll be taking you over the top of a 9,000 foot pass with 12 llamas and camping in the backcountry in 3 feet of snow just to make sure you get a real late season experience. So
Oh boy.
I'm sure we'll probably end up somewhere in the middle of those two scenarios.
Yeah, no, that's funny. Well, that's cool. You're going back to Oregon there, and that I mean, you don't hear a whole lot about Oregon. I mean, you talked about it in the one podcast we did, but is there a reason why that you want to go back to Oregon so bad?
Redemption.
Okay. Yeah, and I did watch the videos last year from that series from Destination Elk, and yes, so if you want to explain that a little bit, what kind of happened there?
Yeah, no, and it's hard. I have to definitely stay humble, I guess, because I was humbled there last year. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself and jinx myself, but we went hunting for Roosevelt elk for the first time last year. First time I'd ever hunted Roosevelt elk. And because of our busy schedule, we scheduled it for the first week of the season in Oregon. And last year it opened on like August 25th or something. So it was really early. And it was a tough hunt. I mean, the terrain, the thick vegetation, just the area where the habitat where those elk live makes it tough to hunt. You throw in full moon, warm weather, and pre-rut, and it was a difficult hunt. I think we only had 3 quasi call-ins in 7 or 8 days, and really only 2 that I would consider to be an actual call-in. That the elk came to the calls and came towards our setup. The one the last night, the bull was 6 yards from us in just the thickest mass of ferns you can imagine. And it was so thick, he was 6 yards away and we couldn't even see the ferns moving as he walked through it. So obviously no shot in a situation like that. But I did get a shot, and it was my dream situation. Really nice 5x5 Roosevelt bull just materialized out of the coastal fog in, a terrain that it was, I don't know, medieval, like just all the fog, and it was dark, old growth timber and green moss and green ferns everywhere. And it was just ideal for what I'd always dreamed of. And the bull stopped at 35 yards and I shot. And upon further review, we found out that I'd hit a stub that was sticking up about a little over halfway to the elk, and it deflected my arrow down, and my arrow was stuck in a tree right behind where the elk had been standing. So missed my only opportunity there. And so this year we're going back to get a little redemption. Just, I don't say that disrespectfully. They're going to go back there and kill an elk just to teach it a lesson type of a thing. But it was a challenging hunt, and I'm embracing the challenge and looking forward to the challenge this year.
Yeah, no, that's good. And yeah, hopefully that all works out for you. Is there a lot of differences with the Roosevelt besides the terrain and everything as far as the elk itself and calling? Is that much different from the Rocky Mountain elk?
I don't think so. And I think a lot of people feel there is a big difference. They say that Roosevelt elk don't bugle. They're impossible to call in. You can't find them. And I think all of those are valid, but I think all of those are centered around the habitat and the terrain that they live in. It's so thick over there, and those elk literally just live in these little pockets where they will travel 400 yards as their home territory, and they don't travel outside of that because they don't have to. They have so much thick vegetation for security. There's so much feed everywhere. Everything over there's wet, so they've got water. They just don't have to move. And even if you bump them, it seems like they go 300 yards up on the ridge and stand there. If they don't hear you coming, they bed right back down there, and the next day they're back in the same bed. And so a lot of differences there between them and Rocky Mountain elk. And I think with that thick vegetation, you don't hear bugles. You'll hike and hike and hike and not see any sign, and then you'll get into that one little 400-yard pocket where the elk lives, and you'll hear an elk bugle. And I think you just have to be closer to him to hear him bugle. You don't hear as many bugles because they are so just spread out in pockets. They aren't moving, so you don't happen to be there when an elk comes through bugling. And then as far as calling them in, it's definitely tough. You don't have the shooting lanes. If things aren't right, that elk's probably not going to be as likely to come just plowing through brush. I mean, they do, but They still are elk, and they use their senses to stay alive. So trying to find a place where the elk is comfortable coming into the calls creates a challenge. And so I can see where people say you can't call in a Roosevelt bull. My experience and the experiences of those who I have drawn off of to gain a little more insight and knowledge on it is that Roosevelt elk are actually more aggressive than Rocky Mountain elk when it comes to calling them in. And then the last thing is just that terrain. You're hiking in wet country. Everything's wet. Even if it's sunny out, it's still everything. The fog comes through and it sounds like it's a rainstorm just from the condensation dripping off of the trees. And so you're constantly wet. The vegetation's super thick. So just getting through it is tough. And, we'd get back to the truck at night and feel like we were more wore out than when we hiked 14 miles in Wyoming or Idaho in rugged terrain. And look, and we'd only covered 6 miles that day. It's just a lot of fighting brush and on your hands and knees and dealing with wet conditions. And so it's different, but I think that the differences are attributed to the terrain and the habitat, not so much the species.
So what I'm picking up out of that is you might be hunting the same type of terrain and everything at the end of September when you draw that Pennsylvania elk tag.
If I draw that Pennsylvania elk tag, I think there are going to be a lot of similarities based on what I've seen.
Besides the fact that you should be able to call them in a lot easier, but the terrain and stuff sounds so similar. I mean, water everywhere, super thick. It's tougher to hear bugles as far as like just because of the really thick vegetation. But I think you'd have a little bit better chance of getting them coming in Pennsylvania.
Well, not only that, but there's 400-inch bulls behind every tree in Pennsylvania. So.
Every tree.
Well, I think with the limited number of tags that they give out back there, it's pretty easy to make the success on mature bulls look really good because you give out 20 tags or whatever, and 10 of them happen to be really big bulls. It definitely gives that impression that you can go to Pennsylvania, and if you were one of the very few chosen to receive a tag, you definitely can be hunting mature bulls.
Yeah, and this is the first year with an archery season, so that'll be interesting too.
And you didn't tell anybody that before the application period, did you?
I
you
might
didn't
have.
My chances, did you?
Yeah, I mean the article I wrote on how to apply in Pennsylvania might have been the most popular one I wrote this year, but sorry about that, Corey.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, no, it's cool. I'm excited for it, but no, to kind of go back there. So, what do you do in Oregon as far as like scouting out the area ahead of time? If there's water everywhere and it's different vegetation, how does that differ from like when you're planning like an Idaho hunt?
Like an Idaho hunt, when I start my e-scouting, I'm looking for really I get into an area, and the first thing I look for on Google Earth is a north-facing slope. I want to find a north-facing hillside that's got dark timber, preferably with a bench about 3/4 of the way up it. And if I find that, I think, okay, that's a prime elk bedding area. And so, that's really how I start my e-scouting. When you look at the Oregon coastal range, everything there looks like a north-facing slope. It's just everything is thick, dark timber. It all looks good. But those elk are so spread out and in pockets that you can't rely on that. In Idaho, I'll find an area where I can hike through 6 miles and locate a whole bunch of north-facing slopes or good bedding areas, and I'm pretty confident that as I hike through that area, I'm going to find an elk bugling in September. I don't have that same confidence in Oregon. You have to cover so much more country. I think that the opportunity to walk right by a pocket of elk and not know they're there is higher. So I think, what I would look for more in Oregon are breaks in terrain in those fringe areas, a logged area, a clear cut where they went in and literally just cut down every tree there and exposed a whole open hillside, because what that does is creates a lot of great feed source. A lot of those canopies, those old growth canopies over in Oregon look beautiful. But when you look at the vegetation inside those canopies, there's nothing nutritious there. The sun doesn't penetrate that, and it doesn't grow any feed for the elk. And so as great as they look, they don't make good bedding areas. They don't make good feed areas. So if anything, all you're getting in those areas is a transition between the two. So I'm looking for places where they're going to be more likely to feed, an area that's been logged 20 years ago that's now filled with just the thickest mass of little saplings and new growth pine and fir. Those create good bedding areas and good places for yellow jackets to hide, as well as some feed in there. But a logging area is good. So I'm looking for areas where there is a break in the vegetation, where there are some new growth or some freshly logged areas, and then trying to correlate that to maybe a place where the elk can slip right into close by to bed. So definitely looking at that. I'm also relying on locals. I've got friends that live over there, and we'll be hunting with David Brinker for 3 or 4 days again, and then another group, Corey and Shannon from Angry Spike Productions, who they're just absolute elk killers for Roosevelt Elk on the coast. And so, we're definitely relying on their knowledge of the areas as well. But there are areas, when I get there, it's not like I'm just tagging along, following them. I'm still saying, hey, that area looks good. Let's go give that a try. And, we're going into it relying on their experience and teaming up with them, but at the same time contributing, hopefully in definitely not an equal way, but contributing to the experience as well, and sharing some of that load of, hey, we've got a couple areas that look good. Let's go give those a try. And
yeah, no, that makes sense. And especially the logging cuts and stuff. I just know, again, from Pennsylvania, that's a big thing that draws in the elk and deer. But the fresh grasses that are growing now, it has the sunlight coming through it. They seem to flock those areas, and even so not during the season, but when I'm shed hunting for elk, I go to those areas because they're always out there in the wintertime, and same thing in September when I just go out to bugle them before there was ever a season, and you always find them in those logging cuts. And and as far as you were saying with the thicker ones, them bedding in, it's amazing that they can even get their antlers through those trees, but somehow they do.
They do, and they usually do it very quickly, and it takes us hours to crawl through there. And I would make a guarantee that we are cut up much more than the elk are when we get through some of that. So it just seems like everything in Oregon has thorns and is poisonous or wet, and people are like, why are you going back there and excited about it? And I think that's part of the allure, the challenge of it, but there's just something mystical about that terrain. And when you see an elk materialize in that kind of terrain, it's I don't know, there's an appeal for sure.
I think you need to talk to John Barklow at Sitka to have him make some sort of an elk hide, clothing for you to get through some of those coastal areas.
Slip through it and come out unscathed on the other side.
Not highly breathable, but that's great. So then after Oregon, and so you kind of explained some of the things that you're going through there, and you come back and take a little break, and then you're in your home state of Idaho. Are you going to be going to kind of a new area, or is this an area you've hunted in the past?
We, we're going to break it up into two parts. We're going to hunt. I'll call it road hunting. It's don't get the impression that we're driving around the truck and hoping to see an elk, but very mobile. So we've got areas that are a mile or two off the road. And so we'll drive there, and before daylight, we'll hike into that area. And if there's nothing there, we'll be back at the truck, a half hour after daylight, and we'll drive to another area and still get in a morning hunt. And so very mobile. We'll pick off a lot of those areas that we've had luck in the past that we've hunted for 20 plus years, and do that. And then we'll take a little break on the weekend. And then the next week, that full week, the last week of September, we're going to hit some new areas that are more remote. That actually I've been spending the summer trying to get into some of them. And, there's some areas I've tried to get into, and it's like, this is not going to be conducive to getting back here and killing 2 elk and packing them out. So it's just, whether it's just complete bluff areas and just too remote and too rocky. But we've got a couple new areas that I've put trail cameras in that we're excited. We probably won't even get back and check the trail cameras until that part of September. And we're going to, hopefully be able to, having 9 days to hunt and just two of us with tags, we can be a little more selective. And most of the time when we're hunting with 5 or 6 days in Idaho, trying to collect content, trying to fill the freezer, we aren't all that picky. And so, this year we're going to have an opportunity to maybe target a more mature elk. And again, it's Idaho public land, over the counter. So I'm not saying, hey, we're going to hold out for a 350 bull or anything, but we can hopefully get into some areas where there are more mature elk, and we can hopefully target some of those bigger herd bulls.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. Let those ones go, and I'll take them out of the herd for you.
Exactly.
Oh, that's great. And you and I, when we had talked in the past a little bit about like your, quote unquote road hunting method, I like that idea as far as being able to move around and be mobile. And I really plan on utilizing some of that, in the hunt plans that, that we kind of put together for our Idaho trip. We have a lot of areas, marked on the maps, and will be downloaded on our onX app and everything else, because I went into it last year, at 14 days in Colorado, and didn't find elk where we normally did. And all the spots I had were, I had like 3 areas marked out, and they were all at the same type of elevation and everything else. And I realized that they weren't there because of, that reason ended up being the water. But, having those backup areas that you can bounce around to and just keep going until you find the elk. I like that method. I really plan on, trying it myself.
Totally. Yeah. And I think we went through a full evolution of hunting that way growing up, just because I grew up in an area where there were a lot of logging roads. And so that was really, you just had to be mobile. The elk moved a long ways. And so we kind of got accustomed to going on a morning hunt, going back to the truck, driving somewhere else, and going on an evening hunt. And then we got into the adventure side and thought, man, we need to go deep, way back in there, and take 10 days worth of gear and, getting into some of that. And we realized pretty quickly that, especially here in Idaho with wolves and different things, you can get back into an area that you scout all summer and it was filled with elk, and overnight it changes and there's nothing there. You don't see a track, you don't hear an elk. And you've spent a full day or longer getting in there. You've spent a couple days looking, just thinking the elk have to be just over the next ridge, and that's really all you can cover in that country is one ridge. And then you finally decide to back out, and you come out, and it takes you a day to get out and a day to get somewhere else, and your season's over. And so there are definitely areas that we know that we can go back into, and bivvy hunting is good, or even going back and setting up a spike camp can be effective. But for the most part, I found that just being mobile, and we'll cover 12 to 14 miles a day on foot, and we're wearing ourselves out. But a lot of times we're doing that. We're getting in the truck, we're driving 10 miles, we're throwing out a bivvy tent and a sleeping bag, we're falling asleep, and we're waking up the next morning, we're hiking for 10 or 12 miles there, and we're hiking back out, and we're pulling up our bivvy tent and jumping in the truck and driving 10 miles and trying another area. So we just really go until we find the elk, and then we hunt them, and from there go to find the next one.
Yeah. And so with Idaho specifically, how much does it deter you with people and hunting pressure? Does that bother you a lot, or you try to how do you kind of manage that?
It's there's people, and I think anytime you're on an over-the-counter public land hunt, you have to just assume there's going to be some level of competition from other hunters. With that being said, I've learned that if there's somebody parked where I want to hunt that day, I can drive down the road another 4 miles and find another similar canyon and probably have just as good of luck up there. So I don't get too discouraged. I just learn to adapt pretty quickly if we can and stay optimistic about it. Obviously, you have a plan to go into a place and you've scouted all summer and you pull up there and there's another truck parked there. It's not a lot you can do about it. And so you just have to, it's frustrating, but you have to move on. And, but with that being said, I think we've learned that people will drive right by some prime areas to get to a trailhead. And, there might be a road going to the trailhead that's 9 miles long, and they'll drive from the pavement to the trailhead and not stop and hunt anything in between because they want to get to that trailhead, and from there get back farther into the country. So, we've found some of these little pockets that are closer to maybe closer to towns, closer to roads, steep hillsides that look like a vertical cliff that you wouldn't ever think there would be an elk up there, but right up at the top of that vertical cliff is a really nice basin you can't see from the road. And so just identified a lot of those areas, and we'll hit those, and they're short hunts. They're a morning hunt, and within 4 or 5 hours if there's elk in there. And so, I mean, we really do a lot of scouting during September, and I always call it scouting with a bugle tube is the most effective way to know if there's an elk there right then. And so we cover a lot of country and look for that elk that's vocal on that day.
It kind of reminds me from your Destination Elk series last year when you took the hunter that won the Mountain Ops challenge there or giveaway, whatever it was. Was that kind of a similar situation where that was near a road, if I remember right?
So Tommy was the nicest man. Just, I mean, excited as can be. He's hunted elk 9 or 10 times and has yet to kill one. And he was super excited for this hunt. But Tommy also was coming from Texas, and he's 65. He had knee replacement surgery earlier in the year. Just, coming from sea level and hunting at 8,000, 9,000 feet, it physically, he had some struggles getting up to where we needed to be. So we tried getting him away from the road and from the other people because there were other hunters in that area. And the first day we were able to do it and got back up into an area, and it was incredible. We had multiple call-ins, multiple bulls that were screaming, and just didn't get it done. And then after that, we hit it too hard out of the gate, and it was more our fault than Tommy's. We knew we had to get back up in there to have a chance, and I thought we have a better chance on the first day than on the last day of doing that. And realistically, had we hunted a little bit easier the first day and broke him in and got him acclimated to it, we probably wouldn't have hurt him quite as bad. But yeah, after that, he was more excited to hunt closer to the roads. And we got into some elk closer to the roads, but the reality was people had them pushed back 2 or 3 miles off of the roads, and we were hoping to catch one as it was moving through, and just didn't have those same opportunities that close.
Yeah, no, I remember that video series, that part there where it had the call in on the elk and everything else, and to be honest, I come from Pennsylvania. We have hills and everything, but the elevation is so different. Like it takes a solid couple days before I feel like myself, climbing up and down the mountains.
Yeah. And he, to his credit, he could go a couple miles on a treadmill, at a pretty good pace. And he was a fighter. I mean, he was a college football player, and so there was no give up in him, but literally he gave it all he had. And there's a difference, man. You put a 30-pound pack on your back and climb from 6,500 feet to 9,000 feet, and you're coming from literally 60 feet above the sea. It's tough to prepare yourself for that physically. And there are ways you can, and things that we've learned even since that hunt that we share with people. They're like, hey, if you are coming from low elevation, don't put on a training mask and get on a treadmill and just walk. Put on a backpack and go find the steepest hill, whether it's 100 feet from the bottom to the top, and just go as hard as you can to the top and turn around, come down, and just go up and down that. Make yourself puke, but you've got to get all of your muscles working together and forcing your lungs to put oxygen into your blood and get that oxygen to all of your muscles. And so, I mean, things that we learned from that as well that we've taken for granted living here and not having to acclimate to elevation.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And yeah, I think we talked about that in the last podcast when we were talking about the physical preparation and the hills and everything. And that's as real as you're going to get when you're not in the mountains, finding a hill like that. And you can find a hill really anywhere, even in flat country, something, similar to that. And
go find a stadium and climb up the stairs. I mean, really, that's doing stairs with a backpack on is, if that's all that you do, if you only have one thing that you can do, that's going to be way better than jogging or running or getting on a treadmill or, anything else. If that's the only thing you can do, I think that something like that is probably the most beneficial. And honestly, I haven't had the time this summer to be as dedicated to. I've got a gym in my garage, so I last summer every day was out there doing some kind of a workout. I've just been too busy this summer to devote that time to be able to do it, and I've been gone a lot, so I haven't been at my home gym to do that. So my workout's been a lot of backpack with a 25-pound plate weight and a couple trail cameras and a bunch of water, and I just go out and take off hiking and hike all day on the mountain, and that's what you're going to be doing in elk season. So if you replicate that now, it's going to be the most realistic preparation you can do.
Yeah. So Corey, I have a question, and this is kind of a little bit here for selfish reasons, but I'm going to Idaho as well, and you and I had talked a little bit offline about it, but the area is a little different than what I've been in the past. From the side of it, it's a little bit more broken up between some dark timber and some open country. There's still a decent amount of dark timber in there, but do you find it to be any different, like as far as how you look at areas like that than you do some of the really, thick, areas that you typically are going to?
Not really. The thing about like what you're describing, you've got the south exposures are all wide open. They might have sagebrush intermixed in there, but they're an open hillside that if there's an elk standing there, you can see it from 2 miles away. And then right on the backside, on the north face, it's heavy timber, a lot of older growth, red fir and some of the bigger, not thick vegetation, but heavy timber. So you have good shooting lanes in there. There are draws and things within those slopes that have some thicker vegetation and water and springs and everything. But realistically, I don't look at it a whole lot differently. Those open hillsides are where the elk are going to feed. The heavy timber is where they're going to bed, and they're going to come out on the open hillsides in the evening, spend the night out there. You'll see them first thing in the morning, then they'll go over the ridge onto the north face and bed there. And I think my hunting strategy in those areas is more let them get into the timber, because it's so hard to call an elk in the open country. They can see where you're calling from. They don't see an elk, and they aren't going to come into you. So I do a lot more glassing first thing in the morning, find the elk, find a good herd with, a couple big bulls, and let them get into the timber, watch where they go, and then slip around, get above them, wait for the thermals to change and start coming uphill, and then get in the timber with them and hunt them that way.
Okay. And that's what I was gonna ask you was, I've heard some people say that, they wait, they waiting to see where they're coming out, and they kind of wait till the next day to ambush them, things like that. And I didn't know if like the same strategy with the midday kind of going into the bedroom was the same as in other areas.
I think it's even better.
Oh, good.
They know that they're exposed out on those open hillsides, so they don't linger there as long, and they'll head back probably to their bedding areas earlier in that kind of terrain than they do in a more timbered terrain, like where I hunt here in central Idaho. And because of that, they're more active in those bedding areas. And I think that, once those thermals change, you can get in there and really have a good time hunting elk all day long, especially like you're going the second half of September. That last week should just be lights out, incredible for that midday hunting in the timber.
Oh, that's the kind of information I'm looking for to get me even more excited and unfocused at work. But so like when say you do see them go into the timber like that, and you're waiting for the thermals to switch and you're going in, are you waiting to call until you get, say, you think 200 yards or so from the elk, or how is your kind of strategy to close the deal on that?
No, I'll locate still. I'll get on that main ridge and just drop into the timber. Again, thermals are tricky in that area because you have the open hillside that's warming up really fast. It's getting direct sun first thing in the morning. So the thermals there are going to be pulling up the hill a lot sooner. On the back side, you've got that north face, it's heavy timber. The ground stays really cool. So you've got those competing thermals, which causes a lot of swirling wind, especially from like that 8 o'clock till 9:30 or 10 o'clock time frame. And so you can't rush it too soon, because you'll have the thermals coming up in your face, and you'll get up on the ridge and you step off onto that north face and go 10 yards into it, and the thermals switch and start going straight down the hill, and the elk smell you. So you have to be really careful about not being right on top of the elk. And once I know the thermals are consistent, then I usually, do my normal location. I'll do a location bugle, get an answer, and find out exactly where they're bedded. It's usually not going to be just 200 or 300 yards off of the open ridge down into there. They're still going to travel deep into that timber and find a good bench near some water where it's cool and where they're again protected. So once I locate them, then I can go into my normal hunting routine, which is hunting timber anyway. But it seems like in those areas where there are the open hillsides, the wide open hillsides, transitioning into those timbered draws and timbered north faces, those elk just seem to be more active and more susceptible to the midday calling.
Okay. Well, that helps too with, like, it does act as a funnel for them, where when you have, more, dark timber and stuff, I'm sure it's, a little bit tougher to be able to figure out where they are. When you have a pocket on that north face, you can almost guess that they're going to be in there somewhere.
Yeah. Oh, totally. And that's the other thing. You can sit a mile away on a hillside and glass 10 of these open hillsides that have timber on the north face. And you'll literally see 5 or 6 different herds of elk on different open hillsides. And they'll all start heading back into that timber. And that they're in that timber patch on that timbered hillside. And it's not like a little 20-acre patch of timber. We're talking 1,500 to 2,000 vertical feet from the bottom to the top, and a good amount of timber. But yeah, that they're in there somewhere, and it makes it. I wouldn't say it's you aren't running through a field with a butterfly net scooping them up or anything, but you definitely it helps with knowing, hey, there's a group of elk in here, and if you foul those up, you can go right over the ridge and you're back onto another pocket of timber where you saw elk go, and they have no reason to move out of there unless you bump them. And even when you do bump them, sometimes they don't move out of that timber. And then if they do, they're probably just going over a ridge and into the next patch of timber. So.
Okay. So it was funny when you said a little bit ago about how the timber's different, than some areas where, it might be a little bit more open underneath, the canopy in there, where I was texting the couple of guys that I'm going out there with, and we were talking about the dark timber, and my cousin Mason responded. He goes, "I sure hope it's not like Colorado, which is nothing but blowdowns everywhere and everything else." He goes, "I hope it's just like this, green, just nice and walking." And
and it's a lot of those places they're steep, but there's just these huge trails churned into the hillside, and you'll come to a nice little finger ridge where it is I won't say flat, but it levels out a little bit, and there's a lot of nice benches, and you'll find springs in there, and there's still areas you can get into with blowdowns too. You get some of that jack pine, and it's not fun to go through.
Yeah.
But for the most part, yeah, it's not going to be like the high step and dance that a lot of times you have to do in Colorado to get through the blowdowns.
Yeah, no, that's funny. So, Corey, you talk a lot about the setup portion, and now that, say, you're into an area and you're finding elk, explain a little bit more about the final steps to when you're going to close the deal and just your setup in general.
Yeah, no, and I think the setup is the most important part. It takes you from the location phase to the opportunity phase. And I think it's the point where things fall apart most often, even for those of us who've hunted a long time. It's still the setup that is difficult, because you've got an elk coming into your calls, hopefully, and you're trying to guide them into a shooting lane. And an elk has a mind of its own. So it's really, you got to understand what's going to make the elk comfortable to come in, make it feel like its senses are still protecting it, but not actually. And, things like if you're straight above the elk on a ridge and he's straight down the hill from you, he's probably not going to turn and come straight up the hill. And, understanding the reasons for that, and understanding he's probably not going to come straight down the hill, and he's probably not going to come through a big brush patch, and he's probably not going to come across a wide open hillside, and just all these different things that really go back to the elk's sense of survival. And once you understand that, it's like, that elk's not going to come into this situation. We've got to move ahead 40 yards and see if there's a better spot, and really pick those setups wisely. It can increase your efficiency on getting that elk into a shooting lane. And once that happens, you increase the number of opportunities you have, and the more opportunities you have, the higher chance you have of being successful. So, setups, a couple things that I keep in mind, always the wind. That's every minute of the day when you're elk hunting, you need to know what the wind and the thermals are doing. As you're closing in that distance to set up, it's even more important understanding, hey, is there a competing hillside somewhere that's making the wind kind of go sideways here, or pulling it into this draw because the draw is cooler? As I move over the hill and the elk's there, is it going to be a solid uphill thermal? And if it is, that elk's he's going to feel more comfortable coming in above where we're at, by 40 or 60 yards. He's just going to want to circle above that. So, for the collar, I want to have the collar down below, so that elk's going to circle above. And as a shooter, I need to find my shooting lanes up on that level where the elk's likely to come in. And that way the elk's coming in, he thinks, hey, that bugle's down below me, I'm going to circle above it and get its wind before I commit. But that shooter has to be set up in a way that allows him to get a shot before the elk can tell that there's danger coming there from the scent. So the thermals are huge. The wind is huge. I like to get on the same level as the elk to set up and try to call them across the hill rather than up or down. And then the last thing is just making sure you have ample shooting lanes. You don't want to get a shot at an elk and miss. And so getting there, picking the shooting lanes, and using a rangefinder to get a distance on several landmarks so that you don't have to range the elk when it comes in, because that's more movement and more time. You want to know, hey, that tree's at 45 yards. When that elk walks in front of it, I'm holding my 40-yard pin on his vitals and good to go. And just, I try to pick a target at 20 yards, a target at 30, a target at 40, a target at 50, and they might not be right next to each other, but at least I have a point of reference. So when that elk comes out, I'm like, oh, he's in front of the 60, but he's behind the 40, and I've got this tree over here that was 50. He looks about there. I'm going to shoot him for 50. So I don't necessarily range the elk and have an exact distance, but I have a really good idea of how far he is.
Yeah. And with that being said, I mean, if you're off a couple of yards, it's not going to make a huge difference. As far as with the size of the elk vitals and everything. And obviously you want to be as accurate as possible, but like you said, there's not a chance to pull up a rangefinder in the limited amount of, call-in scenarios and encounters that I've had. I tried pulling out my rangefinder once and he went right through it, and that was it.
Yeah. And by the time you get your bow drawn back, he's moved 15 yards. You don't know how far he is anyway. So
exactly.
No, and it's, if an elk's coming in, he starts raking, I'll pull out my rangefinder and I'll hit him, and I'll say he's exactly 47 yards and I'll shoot him for that. And like you said, if you're off by a couple of yards, it's not going to matter if you still pick a spot and aim. And I think that's one of the biggest, that shooting sequence. People get so excited. There's this huge elk, they draw back, and like, all I have to do is just point the bow at him and shoot, and I'll hit him. And it's amazing at 15 yards how you can miss an elk by a foot still if you don't, settle into that shot sequence and, anchor the same way you practiced and aim through your peep sight with your pins and pick a spot on the side of the elk. It's just, I think we get excited, and if we forget to do those things, we haven't practiced enough where it's just second nature, we'll be kicking ourselves because it's like, that was a 20-yard chip shot. How did I miss? And it's easy to do when you get excited.
Oh, I've done it on whitetails more than I'd like to admit, and it just what it came down to me, and this is just me personally, but I have to basically talk to myself in my head and go through that process. I have a little mantra or saying that I have in my head, and just to go through it and make sure that all those things are happening, because I can't tell you, especially when I was younger, I'd shoot and I'd call my dad and I'd be like, hey, I shot a big buck. Well, how'd you hit? I don't know. I don't remember anything. I just completely blacked out. I don't know if I looked through my peep sight or if I even, did anything. And one thing that I try to do, again, this is going back to whitetails, and it definitely can be applied to elk, I think, is, so depending on like your sight, where, if say you're shooting fixed pins, or if like in my scenario, I'm shooting a spot hog that has a double pin on it, and my top pin set at 30, I leave it at, my bottom one's around 42, and that depends on this, your bow speed. But I look at, say when you pull back and you draw on an elk, if both of those are in the, in the vitals or something, depending on where you're going, you're going to be okay. Like you should, when you're practicing with shooting a 3D target or whatever, figuring out like where the vitals sit between your couple pins, say he's between 30 and 40 and you have those couple pins there, figuring out where they fit. And if they're both, within the lung cavity, you should be okay. And I don't know if that's the right way of doing it, but that's kind of what I've done, at least for a double check or something to look back on.
Totally. Yeah. And there's a lot of people that do that. For me, I shoot a 5-pin sight, a slider sight. And the reason I do that is so I can practice out to 120 yards during the summer. And I'd never even consider taking a shot at an animal at that distance. But shooting at 120 yards, your form has to be dialed in. And so it really helps me with my aiming. It helps with my form and follow through. And then when I move up to 40 yards and I have my fixed pins there, 40 yards just seems like a chip shot. It's just so much closer. My form is locked in. My groups are so much tighter. And, the thing to keep in mind is it's really easy to miss a 20-yard shot. Even if you put your 20-yard pin on the target, if you aren't focused, if you aren't picking a spot, and if you aren't following through, you can miss an elk at 20 yards, even though the pin was on the target. And so I think, practicing, making sure that your form is good, making sure that you're anchoring in the same spot and it's natural. Because there have been times when I was younger, I pulled back and didn't look through the peep sight. I literally pulled the string back right past my eye and looked at the sights and had a 20-yard pin on the elk and completely missed it because just my anchor point's floating out there. And so, that's an important part of it. And I think the thing to keep in mind is if you are gap shooting where you have a 20 and a 40-yard pin, and if he's 30 yards, you just have to put the 2 pins straddling the vitals and shooting. It's still important to pick a spot and aim for that spot and follow through on that spot. And, it can work really well. And I know a lot of people that hunt successfully that way, but I also know people that have 5 pins that can't hit the elk every year. And, it just comes down to that form and follow through. And that's my mantra. And it's what I tell my kids when we're shooting. It's what I tell them when we're, shooting free throws in basketball, anything. It's focus, form, and follow through. And pretty much any physical thing that accuracy is important. I think those three, that focus, form, and follow through, is always going to be a pretty important process to follow.
Yeah. I mean, so Corey, with me, this year I had struggled quite a bit at the beginning of the year with target panic, and a lot of it was usually in years past I shot all winter and I was always just shooting all the time, and this year I had moved and didn't I didn't have a place where I shot indoors close to me. I can list a whole bunch of excuses, but nonetheless I didn't shoot as much. In the spring I was just struggling. I was punching the trigger, and so I had a help from a ton of people, but one of them was Brady Miller. I had him on the podcast to talk through it, and he went through his system, which he wrote a really good article on, and basically told me to take off my sight and just practice form. And I did that for literally a month and a half and never started shooting actual targets until it was the beginning of July here. And then that just completely elevated my shooting. Like once I put it on, I was already further ahead than when I was shooting at the targets all the time, just because I was going through the same process and the follow through and everything else, like saying those, words in my head, that I'm making sure I'm pulling through and doing everything else there. And now, my practice consists of, similar to you, I don't shoot at 120 yards, but I'm shooting at, 80 yards. And so, and trying, doing total archery challenges and things like that really test you. And yeah, I'd never shoot an elk or an animal at all at that distance, but it feels so good when I move up to close distances and go through it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that blind bale shooting like that, it's, I can remember I've struggled with target panic my entire life and tried every kind of release. And it's really it's a mental block. It's two different parts of your brain competing with each other. You've got one that's focusing on aiming, and you've got another one that's wanting to execute the shot. And the problem is I could never keep my pin on the spot I wanted to aim at, because the second it got close, my finger was wanting to pull the trigger, and it basically became shotgun shooting. You know, I'd move the pin through the target, and when it came across where I wanted to hit, I'd pull the trigger. And for me, I literally decided I've got to learn to aim and be okay with that pin sitting on the dot and not feel like I have to shoot. And so I thought, well, why don't I just pull back and aim and just not shoot? You know, just tell myself I'm not going to shoot. All I'm doing is aiming, and I'm going to let down. And I literally, it took 5 or 6 times, I couldn't put the pin on the target without pulling the trigger. I couldn't make myself do it. And once I finally did it, and I was able to let that bow down, it changed everything. And it just rebooted my brain. And I'll do that sometimes now. I'll get into it a little bit where I'm hovering around it. I'm just having troubles. I'm anticipating the shot a little bit. And as soon as the pin gets close, I know I'm going to pull the trigger. I'll just tell myself, all right, I'm not going to shoot. I'm going to do 6, just target aiming practice. And I'll pull back, put the pin on it, put my finger on the trigger, and know that I'm not going to shoot, and force myself to hold it there for 20 seconds, pin on the dot, and then I'll let the bow down. And I'll breathe for a couple minutes, and then I'll draw back again and aim and hold the pin on there and just program my brain so that it's okay with that pin sitting on the dot, and it doesn't feel like it has to execute a shot immediately. That, hey, that pin can sit there and it's okay sitting there. And then I can go through my shot process of, taking my time, squeezing the trigger. And it's been a game changer for me as far as accuracy and just having a lot more confidence in the shot.
Yeah, no, that's so big. I mean, 'cause if you can't execute the shot, all the work that you did leading up to it is, and things still do happen. I mean, everyone misses at times, but the less chance of that is definitely better, obviously.
Yeah. And that's what you're doing when you're blind bail shooting. You're programming your brain to be okay with not having to focus on the sight pins and just executing that shot process. And I guess mine is probably the reverse of that, not worrying about the shot process, focusing on the aiming process, and just separating those two processes, because they really are separate. You've got to aim, and at some point during that aim, you've got to initiate a trigger pull. And I think the brain wants to put the two together, and separating those two and realizing that, hey, I'm going to focus on aiming, let the trigger pull come natural. And it's been super helpful for me, and it's something I struggled mightily with for a long time.
Yeah. So that's going to be a pretty exciting year, I think, for all of us. And I'm excited to see what the Destination Elk, the whole process and it's going to be released on YouTube, I'm assuming, again.
Yeah, so we'll film everything. We'll film the full day. So I mean, all the details of getting up, loading our pack, getting in the truck, hiking into the area, locating elk. It's really, the aim of it is educational, and we'll take each day in the field and we'll break down something that happened, whether it's from scouting, whether it's a setup or a call in, and explain right there in the field, hey, here's the strategy that either worked or that we should have used because what we did didn't work, and really use the whole series as an educational component so that we're able to take people along with us. I mean, we literally will show you everything that goes on, good and bad. And last year was hard. There was a lot of bad stuff, a lot of disappointment, and we showed all that. And hopefully, those who watched were able to learn from it as we were. And this year, we're hoping to maybe tip the scales a little bit and show a little bit more of the fun and the success, and bring some education from that side. But yeah, so we'll start sometime first part of November. We haven't locked down an exact date yet, but sometime around that first part of November, we'll start each day launching a day's video from the season and go in chronological order from the beginning to the end of the season. And we're hoping to end up with around 30 days of video to share on the Elk 101 YouTube channel.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm looking forward to checking it out. Although when I get to see it, it's going to be a little bit later, as that comes out right in the middle of the whitetail rut. And I'm not, my brain doesn't, I can't go back and forth between the two.
Totally. No, and the good news is, and we're giving away a pile of gear. We're giving away bows. We're giving away boots. We're giving away coolers. We're giving away an electric bike, a backcountry e-bike. We're giving away the Elk 101 Mountain Ops elk truck, all of that's going to be given away during the series. So it's all people have to do is watch the series and leave comments once it starts, and then we go through and randomly pick winners for all the gear. Every day of the series there will be giveaways. So
wow,
a lot of cool and exciting stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Corey, is there anything else that you want to leave the listeners here with for, your last time coming on before the elk season kicks off?
I could sit here and talk elk hunting for the next 2 weeks straight, I think. So, no, I think if listeners, if there's anybody who is going hunting, that apprehension, doubt, insecurity, any of that, for someone that might be coming from back east and worried about some of those logistics and being successful, just have an adventure, go and make it fun. Don't stress out. Absolutely work for success, but don't make that your end goal. Enjoy the adventure and work to make success come. And when the two cross, it's there's nothing like it. But don't put too much pressure on yourself to be successful and make that the what makes or breaks the hunt, because there's so much to be learned. There's so much that's just amazing about spending a week in elk country, and sometimes we forget to soak all that in, I think. So go out and have fun, work your tail off, and success will come.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Corey. And just lastly, would you like to give a little bit some places where people can find some more of your content and a little bit about everything?
Yeah, the Elk 101 YouTube channel, we've got a ton of content there. A lot of it's educational, especially learning to use elk calls. We've got a video series on learning to use diaphragm elk calls and just how to master the sounds you need to learn on that. Just the website, elk101.com. There's 11 years worth of articles and videos and any topic you can imagine related to elk hunting. And then Instagram, my personal Instagram is just Corey Jacobsen of Elk 101, and we have a Elk 101 Instagram as well. I think that pretty well sums up most of the places I hang out.
Perfect. And obviously, as it's been on the introduction to the podcast here, the University of Elk Hunting and all the great information that's in that course, I still, again, that was my 4th year of going through it, and I'm still visiting it at least a few times a week, going through different sections and going back and taking notes. And I even have parts of the videos, like downloaded on my phone so I can use them, in the field. And when I say that, I mean like specifically when it comes down to the quartering in elk and everything else, because I've done it with whitetails, but it's always nice to, when it comes down to it, if you need to review that, to have that right at my hands.
Yeah, and just look how often we go to YouTube to learn to do something, and we'll pause it, as we're doing the process and actually doing it on our own. We'll pause the video and do it, and then we'll play it again and watch that section. And that is one of the benefits of being able to take it with you offline, is if you're in the field and get stuck or have a question, it's right there, and you can just look it up and say, okay, that's how I do it. I'm confident now, and continue. So I think it's probably worth mentioning there's a discount code as well for listeners for the online course if they wanted to sign up. And in addition to the discount, you get 20 extra chances to win the great big elk truck we're giving away in November. So a little plug, if anybody's on the fence and wants to sign up there, you can save, I think it's a $20 discount, isn't it?
Yeah, it's $20 discount with the code East Meets West.
Yep.
So all right, Corey. Well, thanks again so much for coming on and talking and sharing some of your knowledge here on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. And if the elk tag gods shine on me and I happen to draw an elk tag in Pennsylvania, you'll be the first one I call.
All right. Hey, maybe we'll both draw. All right.
That's right.
That's what
that would be epic.
All right, Corey. Well, we'll talk soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Bo.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of East Meets West Hunt with your host, Bo Martonic. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit eastmeetswesthunt.com, Facebook at East Meets West Outdoors, and Instagram at East Meets West Hunt. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.